What up, bro Cyrus? I'm Leon, the Paperback Maniac, coming at you with the inaugural video for Satanic Summer, a series of vintage horror book reviews I'll be doing over the next couple of months on novels dealing with Satan, demons, demonic forces, or any subject matter peripherally related to that. Now, before we get to the first book review in that series, I do want to give a little PSA and shout out to Arrow Video, which, for my money, is the best independent distributor of obscure horror films today. I think that they're doing some really great stuff. They recently put out a Blu-ray of an obscure 80s horror film called Trapped Alive. This movie was shot in 1988, I believe, under the title Forever Mine, but it wasn't released until the early 90s or so. This movie was on my radar, about a year ago when I saw a review of it in the amazing YouTube channel 80s Horror Central, which for anyone who is a fan of obscure 80s horror flicks, you really need to be subscribed to that channel. It's really good. It was actually one of the inspirations for this channel, believe it or not. This is a film that I recently watched, and I really had a blast with it. You'll see that it has some really cool originally commissioned artwork. I think the artist that they use a lot is a guy named Justin Osborne. I think Arrow, they're one of the few distributors who has like newly commissioned artwork for these old school horror films that I actually like. I think they're not like overly comic booky. They get the tone of the films right, unlike some other distributors who have newly commissioned artwork. And of course, for the purists, they always have the original artwork in there too, like on the reverse side. That's really cool. But yeah, I watched this recently, had a blast with it. I think it's surprisingly well executed for like a low budget independent horror film from the late 80s. It's got good lighting, good cinematography, sleek direction. It's got a cool cannibalistic mutant monster. But what really makes this movie stand out, I think, is a particular female performance at the end, which is next level. One of the most over-the-top, absurd, histrionic performances I've seen in a while. I mean, it makes Rebecca Gayhart's performance at the end of Urban Legend look nuanced and understated. But yeah, the actress really went for it, and I love her for that. Really, really entertaining. But just wanted to throw that out there. Check out Arrow Video. Check out Trapped Alive. Check out 80s Horror Central on YouTube because it's a great channel. All right, so getting into the book review of the day. Today, we are taking a look at Blood Sabbath by Leigh Clark. This book was published by Zebra in 1991. I will go ahead and begin by reading the synopsis from the back cover. Karen Roberts prided herself on her loving relationship with her 16-year-old daughter, Heather. The two of them had always been honest and open with each other, until now. Heather had started spending more time with her best friend Sharon, and now strange things were happening in the Roberts household. Flowers inexplicably wilted and died. Heather's favorite doll was found mangled and charred, and Heather herself was no longer the good little girl she had always been. It had all started when Sharon dragged her to Magda Prokash's black magic ceremony. All Heather could think about at the time was getting home before her curfew. But when Magda spelled out the name of the demon Asgaroth with her tarot cards, Heather felt the darkness, felt it inside her, as if she herself was being possessed. She knew then that she wouldn't make it home for dinner, but she would be just in time for the Blood Sabbath. All right, so this novel opens with a prologue in which a coven of Wiccans are performing a seance in a shabby bungalow deep in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. Now, the author gets props for using a word I had never heard before in my life on the very first page. And that's no mean feat, considering that I was a lit major and am now an English teacher and have prided myself on my vocabulary, my prodigious lexicon, since I was like a teenager. But this guy, Leigh Clark, just casually drops the word terpsichorean on the very first page. That's an adjective that apparently means related to dancing. Terpsichorean, and he uses it to describe the way wind chimes whirl in the dry, hot gusts of Southern California wind. So, mad props for using a word like terpsichorean in a Zebra horror paperback. So one of the members of this coven at the seance is 16-year-old Heather Roberts, who's been dragged to the Wiccan meeting by her bestie, Sharon. Now, our protagonist, Heather, is, of course, a knockout in the looks department. She is described as a quote-unquote red-haired Irish Scandinavian goddess with penthouse proportions. Not only is she gorgeous, but she's a good girl at heart as well. Her friend Sharon calls her, quote, Southern California's only certified 16-year-old virgin. So you see Leigh Clark is very well aware of teen horror tropes here, right? During the seance, Heather keeps sneaking bored glances at her watch, worrying that it's approaching midnight. She knows that her mom, Karen, will be pissed if she misses her curfew. Her friend Sharon had taken her to go to this coven meeting. She had promised her, spells, black magic, all kinds of cool stuff. But so far the whole thing has just been one big disappointment. So the ceremony is led by a woman named Magda Prakash, whose house they are at, and who is purported by Sharon to be a wise and powerful witch. Now, Magda has the coven, who she refers to as Children of the Wicca, standing in a circle in her bungalow within a larger circle that's outlined in rock salt. And she's standing in the middle of the central circle, and then before them is this black altar on which rests a bronze statue of a nude cat goddess. Magda is there wearing a brown monk's robe with a hood and holding an old wooden staff high above her head. Basically, think like female version of Gandalf or your archetypal witch. And she is making all of these ominous intonations, saying, "Children of the Wicca, the hour of invocation has come." And she tells the coven that tonight they are going to raise a demon. So she has one girl go and light a triangle of charcoal briquettes on the floor, and then she starts making all of these intonations, chanting to invoke the ancient gods and the dark ones. She says, "Speak, demon, reveal to us your name." And when she gets no response, she has one of the teenage coven members grab her tarot deck, and she starts to do a 10-card divination so that they can reveal the name of the demon that they are summoning. She starts drawing cards. She draws a card, the death card, which causes one of the male members of the coven to freak out and say, "Hey, we need to stop this. This is dangerous." She shuts him up, continues to draw the cards, and eventually she kind of arranges the cards in front of her and spells out the demon's name, Asgaroth. The demon Asgaroth is the one. Now, once she does that, once she spells out the name, the room fills with this unearthly hissing sound, which then escalates into this ear-piercing shriek. A hot gust of wind starts blowing in the room, making the wind chimes, scatter and fall. Now, Heather, the teenage protagonist, starts to get a little unnerved now, and she starts to freak out, and she wants to really get the hell out of there. Now, she had been warned by her friend Sharon that no matter what happens tonight, she should not leave the circle. She cannot like walk out of this circle that they made, but she doesn't listen. She's like super freaked out, so she runs out. The minute that she leaves the rock salt circle, the outer circle that they had formed, the hissing stops. The room goes silent except for this weird sound like a heart beating, and then this hot wind again blows in the room, and then Heather sees a shape of darkness sort of like coalesce before her. This black darkness that is almost like evil, like a corporeal evil that then sort of wraps itself around her, and before she knows it, she is completely enveloped in this darkness. And once that happens, she kind of loses control. She stops to show any expression on her face. She casually removes all her clothing. She starts to become all of these lights start playing across her body, like all of these like multicolored lights, which then like lift her up in the room. So she starts to rise in the air and starts revolving slowly in the air as these lights are playing across her body. And then another hot gust of wind blasts through the room, causing the candles to get snuffed out and the wind chimes to fall down. And then she collapses on the floor unconscious. So, quite a night, and this is a school night, by the way. So the next day, when Heather and Sharon are at school, they go to an expensive private academy in Pacific Palisades where all the students are, quote, tan, fit, and rich. Sharon notices how dispirited her friend Heather looks. She's been out of sorts all day. She doesn't want to deal with her douchey jock boyfriend when he tries to talk to her, and she's just really feeling, like not good. And she doesn't really remember what happened. And Sharon remembers what Magda Prokosh, the witch, had said. She said, "Do not tell Heather. She cannot know what happened. She should not remember, last night's incident." But, Heather is really worried. She has this strange foreboding that something really awful is going to happen. Her friend Sharon tries to assuage her and tell her, no, it's going to be fine. Why don't we go use my tarot deck to try to divine what will happen? Like, we'll try to read the future. So after school, they go, and Sharon gets her tarot deck. They start drawing cards, and it's not looking good, actually, the cards that they draw. The first card they draw is of the Hanged Man, which basically suggests that, Heather is going to be giving herself up to a new way of life soon. There's going to be some life changes. And then she draws even more concern, the Five of Swords, which suggests that she may be in danger physically and that she may be attacked soon. And she starts to get really worried, and and she leaves right away. After she leaves, Sharon looks at all the cards that she had drawn and sees that they are actually the exact same cards that Magda Prokosh had drawn the night before during the seance, and they spell the name Asgaroth. Right, so that is not good. Now Heather goes home. Heather lives with her mother in a nice, expensive house in Encino Hills, one of the nicer parts of the valley. And ever since this incident, this seance, weird things start happening at home. For example, all of the rose bushes and plants around Heather's garden start to wilt and die. Also, Heather's childhood Cabbage Patch doll is found inexplicably torched, just burned and reduced to just like a melted mass. There are also ominous visions of blood flowing down her bedroom dresser. Also, blood coming out of the Cabbage Patch doll, which the Cabbage Patch doll, quote, "whose torn limbs seem to be raw and bleeding inside, with little knobs of bright white bone protruding from the severed arms and legs." And also, Heather is just super out of sorts. She just lashes out at her mother, her Korean gardener, the Hispanic maid, for no reason. And something's definitely wrong here, right? Well, Heather meets up with one of the guys who was at the seance that night, a teenager named Brian McNulty. They meet at an area of the beach called the Cove, and Heather wants to like find out what really happened. So Brian tells her that after she had run outside the rock salt circle, he explains that she had like then just like kind of systematically like removed her clothing until she was naked, and that she then started kind of rising in the air as these multicolored lights played over her naked body, and she was like revolving, and then this hot blast of wind like blew through the room, and then she collapsed on the floor unconscious. Now, he fails to mention that there was also like this inhuman snarling sound coming, kind of like a snuffling, growling sound at that moment too, when she was like up in the air and these lights were enveloping her. Now, of course, Heather is very, very scared now, and she begs Brian to try to help her figure out what's going on and save her, even though she knows that her boyfriend Kurt would be super pissed if he found out about this. They're just going to have to keep it on the DL. And, Brian, who's, of course, very sexually attracted to Heather and has a crush on her, tells her that, sure, he'll help her, try to figure out what's going on, get to the bottom of this, maybe try to, like, send this demon back to wherever it came from. But, of course, like a lot of supernatural horror novels of this time, there are often other antagonists as well as the supernatural ones that there's more to contend with here, such as possibly Heather's asshole boyfriend Kurt, who, unbeknownst to Heather and Brian, is secretly watching them from atop a cliff overlooking the ocean with his goon-like friends. And let's just say he's not happy to see his girlfriend talking with this Brian McNulty figure, and he might do something about that. And there are other people to contend with, not to mention, the witch Magda Prokash, also a gaunt, pale old man who is a quote-unquote warlock of the ninth power. So there are a lot of characters here, right? Well, Sharon, Heather's bestie, is really worried about her friend. And, she goes to Magda to try to get some help and say, hey, I really think something's wrong with my friend. And she's incensed when Magda blows her off and says, like, no, I'm not going to help you. At one point, Sharon screams, I am not just going to stand around here and watch while my best friend gets possessed by a demon. And Sharon believes that Heather is a sensitive, that she is actually a channel for like psychic energy and serves as a medium for like spirit forces. And so she gives her friend Heather an amulet, a pentacle, a five-sided star, which is right here on the cover, a talisman of the occult, to try to help Heather ward off this demon which had kind of come into her when she was sort of vulnerable at the moment of the seance when she ran out of the circle. And whether that talisman is going to work or not, that's to be seen. But that is your basic premise here. So this novel, I think that Blood Sabbath by Leigh Clark really is Zebra done right. I'm going to admit, when I pick up a Zebra title to read, my expectations are usually pretty low. I don't have high expectations, but every now and then I'm pleasantly surprised to find that, they're, an enjoyable, fun, fast read. I mean, here, we get some nice, some nice gore. We get some creative set pieces, some real what the fuck moments. There are no literary pretensions here, of course. It is pure popcorn. But I really love how early 90s this book feels. So, think USA Up All Night. Think, sleepovers with your best friend in the summer of 1991 when maybe you went to like the video store to rent a couple of tapes. Maybe you stopped to pick up a pizza on the way home from that. And that's really what this book is. It is the literary equivalent of comfort food. It's essentially a large, greasy pepperoni pizza with extra cheese and maybe an ice cold Coke to go with it. May not necessarily be good for you, but man, is it satisfying. It is super fun. I really liked the Southern California setting. I always enjoyed horror novels that are set in the San Fernando Valley. I just think it's a great setting, like with the canyons and the deep, steep, winding roads and the palm trees and the boulders and cacti and manzanita. It's fun. Ray Garton's Crucifix was another fun horror novel from the late 80s that I believe is also set in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. But yeah, great setting. The writing here is surprisingly good. There are some nice turns of phrase, some good dictions, such as the aforementioned Terpsichorean. Although don't worry, he doesn't do that a lot. Like he doesn't pull like an Edward Lee and jam the book with all kinds of crazy words like that. But yeah, it had some great, some really memorable, set pieces, well-wrought imagery. I'll read some excerpts here in a minute. But, we do get some occasionally super gory scenes, such as a scene where a teenager is systematically flayed alive by an invisible force. Like his skin is peeled back like a banana peel to expose all the blood-slick muscles and nerves and bones. Very, very nice. Now, the dialogue can be bad, but bad in an incredibly entertaining way. So, although I'm saying bad, I wouldn't change it for the world. It's just super fun, good dialogue. It is a little unclear at times what this demon Asgaroth actually wants, because it's not really trying to possess Heather in the traditional sense. It's more like just messing with her. At a certain point, Brian refers to the demon as some asshole poltergeist, because it's just kind of fucking with her. It does attack people close to her, though. But it does, for a demonic entity, it does at times feel a little haphazard and just purposeless at times, which is real weird. But once the demon does start to kind of go after Heather, we do get some fun nightmare dream imagery right out of a Freddy flick. For example, a scene where Heather is in her bathtub, and then the bottom of the bathtub drops away, and she finds herself suddenly treading water in a large body of bubbling water in a Stygian cavern, or a scene where the carpet and walls of her bedroom start rippling and kind of writhing, as if there are things scuttling underneath it, or a scene where a hellish creature emerges from her bedroom closet. And I actually wrote down a little passage. I'm going to read. This is the scene, just to give you a sense of the kind of pulp horror goodness we get here. This is of a monster that emerges from Heather's closet late at night. It says, "The thing was huge and livid pink, membranous, coated with a slimy red mucus, like a flayed body or an embryo still wrapped in its placental sac. The thing had a shape and no shape as it walked or rolled or crawled toward her, emitting a high-pitched, ear-piercing squeal. Heather turned and ran. Her injured knee gave out. She fell to the soft carpet. The thing fell on top of her. Bloody slime oozed over her naked breasts and thighs. She twisted out from under it and away, striking at it with her fists, kicking at it with her bare feet." Just so fun, right? We also get near drownings in sun-kissed swimming pools. We get a body found boiled alive in a swimming pool with torn out eyeballs and loose, gleaming lobster red skin that slides off the face like a quote-unquote slice of well-done pot roast. We also get a little family drama in here for good measure. For instance, Heather's mother, Karen, has her own sort of conflicted relationship with her mother. Her mother is this wealthy widow who never forgave Karen for divorcing her sort of esteemed and handsome doctor ex-husband. And so there's kind of a theme here of fraught relationships between mothers and daughters, you kind of sense. So, that's good. But Heather's mother, this character, Karen Roberts, surprisingly, it is kind of a strong and empowered female character for like a horror novel, Zebra horror paperback from 1991. I mean, she's like, she's willful and motivated, and she doesn't take crap from anyone, especially, male assholes. Although, then again, this novel is clearly written by a hot-blooded male, especially in the salient male gaze of the way that it's like frequently delineates teen Heather's prominent big breasts with their pointy nipples and their large pink areola that show through the sheer fabric of her revealing blouses. I mean, those exact words, large pink areola, are mentioned multiple times. There's not a single character who doesn't notice Heather's boobs, including Heather's own mother, who's like kind of like jealous of her daughter's physique. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, what else do I have here? Okay, so I love how one character in the novel tries to scientifically explain the demon, because there's always like sometimes that character who tries to like put a little verisimilitude and like explain away like the supernatural, like here, but like in this case it's kind of like in a new age like LA way. Like it's not, this guy says it's not a demon per se, it's actually an energy source from a far off dimension or antiverse that's looking for a human host to use to channel its expression, or to use to like as a means of its expression, or some such nonsense. It's like, Leigh Clark, you really didn't need to do that, but okay. But we get a pretty fun and exciting climax in the nighttime pine forests of the San Gabriel Mountains, and then ultimately on a stone plateau called Altar Rock, where and we get like some really cool set pieces there, especially once the demon Asgaroth kind of finally reveals itself in all its cosmic horror. Really just cool and fun set pieces to visualize. Although I gotta admit that the final Deus Ex Machina is just really just cringy and kind of cheap and unearned, I thought, both character-wise and plot-wise. And it all kind of culminates in an image lifted right out of Michelangelo's painting, The Creation of Adam, which I thought was kind of funny. But just, okay, check out this description of one character's demise. One of many, many gruesome deaths that befall characters, both good and bad, during the climax. So this passage I wrote down: "He jerked backward like a puppet on a string. His neck snapped up toward the burning ark, and his mouth dropped open, so wide it seemed as if his jaw had become unhinged. Blood gushed from the gaping mouth, followed by skin and bone, and pieces of lung and heart and cartilage, and ropes of intestines and everything inside his naked bone-white body. His insides shot upward, defying gravity and sanity, while his empty body crumpled in upon itself like a discarded husk. Then it burst into flame and rose into the night sky in a whirlwind of fire until it disappeared within the greater fire of the burning ark." It's just like really cool imagery, right? Really, it is like fun and gory. Yeah, and that's really what this novel is. This novel is just like sort of like light-hearted, fun. We get an occult shop deep in the San Fernando Valley called the Heart of Darkness, but which the teenage coven members refer to as the Heart. We get old lady occult investigators. We get sinister witches, sadistic warlocks and skinheads. We get a demonic ape-like creature summoned from the blood of ritual murder victims. We get sentient stone statues of ancient cannibal gods, winged elemental demons that like to feast on human prey. We get teenage petulance, a lot of moody teenage petulance, of course exacerbated by the presence of a malign demonic force. We get, asshole jocks in high school who go up to a guy and at school and tell him to, air quotes, "stay the fuck away from my girlfriend or else." Um, we also, unfortunately, get a pretty like in your face rape scene, which comes out of nowhere, and which is treated like just super like casually, and like never even gets mentioned again, which is kind of odd. It's almost like, oh well, boys will be boys, right? But yeah, like as I mentioned, this book is just, I love how early 90s it is, particularly that crossover period like between like the late 80s and the early 90s. I mean, high school kids here are walking around with Sony Walkman, wearing high top Reeboks. Their hair is stiff with mousse and like gel. We get scenes where teen girls are sitting on a bed, watching video cassette tapes of Madonna music videos while eating Doritos and chocolate Haagen-Dazs. We get bedrooms plastered with posters of Madonna and Tom Cruise. We get references to MTV, the glory days of like early 90s MTV. And we get a lot of product placement as well. We get product placement for Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi, which you will only find in a novel. We get product placement for Doritos, Cabbage Patch Dolls, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, an action figure called Dinosaur Commando, which I don't think is real, but which the author really tries to make seem real because every time he writes the name Dinosaur Commando, he puts like a little trademark symbol next to it, which is hilarious. Product placement for McDonald's, particularly Big Macs and fries. So, yeah, just fun. Of course, it must be said that this book would really piss off any real Wiccans because it basically equates Wicca with like Satanism and black magic, which I don't think is the case at all. But, as I said, lighthearted fun. You cannot take this seriously. And yeah, so I enjoyed it for that. This book is not quite as batshit crazy as Leigh Clark's first novel, The Feeding, a book which I reviewed last year on the channel, one of my earlier book reviews, pre-Beard, I think. But so if you are expecting, The Feeding level of craziness, you may be disappointed, but it's got something else. It's got that cheesy early 90s charm that I just love so much. I mean, and also, for fans of teen horror, especially retro teen horror, there is a lot, I think, to recommend here. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, if you want to basically read the literary equivalent of a USA Up All Night movie that you might have watched during a sleepover in 1991, this is your book. This is your book. Just make sure. I mean, I had a lot of fun reading this book. Late at night. I think this is the kind of book that should be read late at night with junk food, like a midnight matinee. And that's my recommendation. But yeah, that is Blood Sabbath by Leigh Clark. Hope you guys enjoyed the review. And as I said, be checking back for more book reviews in this Satanic Summer series, which I hope we'll do throughout the course of the summer. Also be on the lookout for some fun summer horror hauls, which are just around the corner like a killer. So yes, until next time, guys, take it easy. Peace out.